10. My family sold me to a cruel alpha, not knowing he had waited years to claim me. YouTube transcripts. My own father looked me in the eye and traded my life for a corporate bailout. I was handed over to the city's most ruthless alpha to pay off a debt. I expected a living nightmare. What I didn't know was that my buyer had been hunting me for 7 years. In the elite circles of the Whitmore family, being born in Omega was considered a genetic failure. My father, Harrison Whitmore, was a traditional domineering alpha who built his real estate empire on aggressive takeovers and intimidation. My older brother, Preston, was cast in the exact same mold, arrogant, reckless, and desperate for our father's approval. And then there was me, Oliver, the Omega's son, kept out of the press, hidden away in the east wing of our sprawling estate like a shameful secret. I was the family's bargaining chip, raised to be docile, quiet, and eventually married off to whoever could offer the Whitmores the most advantageous alliance. But I never expected to be sold to a monster. It happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was summoned to my father's mahogany pan-led study. When I opened the heavy double doors, the air was thick with the suffocating sour scent of distressed alpha pheromones. My father was pacing behind his desk, a glass of bourbon trembling in his hand, while Preston sat slumped on the leather sofa, his head in his hands. "Sit down, Oliver," my father barked, not even looking at me. I took a seat, my instincts instantly flaring with anxiety. Omegas are naturally sensitive to the emotional shifts of alphas, and the panic radiating from the two men in the room was physically nauseating. "Preston has made a mistake," my father said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "A severe miscalculation. He leveraged 3 of our most valuable commercial properties in an offshore gambling syndicate. He lost. The debt was immediately bought up by Montgomery Holdings." My blood ran cold. Everyone in the city knew the name Montgomery Holdings, and more specifically the man who ran it, Dominic Montgomery. Dominic was an alpha of legendary ruthlessness. He wasn't old money. He was a self-made titan who had clawed his way from the gutters to the top of the financial food chain, leaving a trail of ruined lives and bankrupt rivals in his wake. Rumors surrounded him, tales of extreme cruelty, violent outbursts, and a cold, calculating nature that earned him the nickname the Iron Wolf. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. $75 million, Preston muttered, not daring to meet my eyes. "Payable by the end of the week, or Dominic seizes everything. The houses, the company, the offshore accounts will be bankrupt." "Which brings us to the solution," my father interrupted, slamming a thick stack of legal documents onto the desk. He pushed a gold fountain pen toward me. "Dominic Montgomery has agreed to forgive the debt in its entirety, but he wants something in return, or rather someone." I stared at the papers, my vision blurring. The word bonding contract was printed in bold at the top of the first page. "He wants me," I choked out, a wave of pure terror washing over me. "Why? I've never even met him." "Dad, you can't do this. He's a monster. You know the stories. He breaks people. Do not raise your voice to me." My father roared, his alpha command lashing out and forcing my Omega instincts into terrifying submission. My shoulders instantly slumped, tears pricking my eyes. "You will do your duty to this Oliver. You have lived under my roof, eaten my food, and enjoyed the luxuries of the Whitmore name. It is time you earned your keep. You will sign this contract, and you will pack your bags. Montgomery's men are coming to collect you tomorrow morning." "You're selling me," I whispered, the devastating reality sinking into my bones. "To save Preston, you're selling your own son to a butcher." "I am securing our legacy," my father corrected coldly. Preston finally looked up, offering a pathetic, self-pitying sneer. "Come on, Ollie. It's not like you had a bright future anyway. Just keep your head down. Do what the alpha tells you, and you'll survive." I picked up the pen. My hand shook so violently that the ink blotted on the signature line. In that moment, staring down at my own name, I realized I had no family. I was nothing but property. I signed my life away to Dominic Montgomery, bracing myself for the hell that awaited me. The next morning, a sleek, bulletproof black SUV idled in the circular driveway of the Whitmore estate. I stood on the marble steps, holding a single leather duffel bag containing everything I owned. My father and Preston stood beside me, projecting false bravado. When the passenger door opened, a towering figure stepped out into the misty morning air. Dominic Montgomery was breathtakingly terrifying. He was dressed in a tailored charcoal gray suit that barely concealed the heavy, dangerous muscle beneath. His jaw looked like it was chiseled from granite, and his eyes, a piercing, icy blue, locked onto me with a predator's intensity. But it was his scent that truly paralyzed me. Instead of the aggressive, choking dominance I expected from a cruel alpha, his pheromones were overwhelmingly deep and grounded. A mix of dark espresso, petrichor, and cedarwood. It sent a confusing, forbidden shiver down my spine. Dominic didn't even look at my father. He walked straight up the steps, stopping mere inches from me. The sheer size of him blocked out the sun. "Is this him?" Dominic asked, his voice a low, growly baritone that vibrated in my chest. "Yes, Mr. Montgomery," my father said, stepping forward with an oily smile. As agreed, Oliver is completely subservient, healthy, and ready to fulfill his "I didn't ask for a sales pitch" Whitmore. Dominic snapped, not breaking eye contact with me. "The debt is settled. If you or your pathetic excuse for an heir ever attempt to contact him or me again, I will not bankrupt you. I will bury you. Are we clear?" My father swallowed hard, his alpha pride crumbling instantly. Crystal Dominic turned his gaze back to me. "Get in the car." I didn't argue. I practically ran to the SUV, desperate to escape the toxic presence of my family, even if I was trading it for a darker fate. Dominic slid into the seat next to me, bringing that overwhelming cedar and espresso scent with him. The privacy partition went up, sealing us in the back. As the car pulled away from the only home I had ever known, I pressed myself against the door, tried to put as much distance between us as possible. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the cruelty to begin. I waited for a threat, a harsh touch, or a humiliating demand. Instead, a heavy silence stretched between us for 20 minutes. "You're trembling," Dominic finally stated. It wasn't a question. "I'm sorry, Alpha," I whispered, defaulting to the submissive training my father had beaten into me. "I'll try to stop." A strange, dark expression flickered across Dominic's face, and his jaw tightened so hard I heard his teeth grind. "Stop calling me that. My name is Dominic, and stop acting like I'm going to strike you. I don't hit Omegas." I blinked, confused. "But the rumors, they say you. They say I'm a ruthless bastard who guts his enemies and ruins lives." Dominic finished smoothly, "And they are absolutely right. But you are not my enemy, Oliver." He said my name with such a strange, heavy familiarity that my breath hitched. How did he say it like he had known me for years? We arrived at his private estate, a massive ultra-modern glass and steel fortress nestled in the wooded hills outside the city. Security was incredibly tight, with armed guards patrolling the perimeter. I felt like a prisoner entering a high-tech solitary confinement facility. Dominic led me inside. The interior was breathtakingly beautiful, filled with natural light, rich woods, and warm colors. It was a stark contrast to the cold, oppressive Victorian gloom of my father's house. "Mrs. Gable," Dominic called out. An older, warm-looking beta woman appeared from the hallway. "Show Oliver to his quarters. He is not to be disturbed for the rest of the day. Have the kitchen prepare whatever he wants for dinner." "Yes, Mr. Montgomery." She smiled warmly at me. "Right this way, dear." I looked at Dominic, utterly bewildered. "My quarters. I'm not staying in your room." Dominic paused on his way to his office, looking back over his broad shoulder. His icy blues softened just a fraction. "You're not a captive here, Oliver. Despite what that piece of paper says, you have your own space. You will lock your door if you wish. No one will touch you here." I followed Mrs. Gable up the floating glass staircase in a daze. When she opened the door to my room, I dropped my duffel bag. It wasn't just a guest room. It was a massive, sun-drenched suite, explicitly designed for an Omega. The linens were the softest silk. There were nesting pillows piled high in the corner, and the air was subtly filtered to maintain a calming temperature. But that wasn't what made my heart stop. I walked over to the built-in bookshelf. On the center display stand sat a very specific, worn, leather-bound book. It was a rare first edition collection of 19th century French poetry. My breath caught in my throat. When I was 16, long before my family locked me away, I used to sneak out to a small, dusty antique bookshop in the city. I had found this exact book and put it on layaway, paying a few dollars every week for my meager allowance. But one day, the shop owner told me a stranger had come in, bought it, and left. I had cried for days over losing it. I carefully picked the book up. Inside the front cover, written in my own faded teenage handwriting on a sticky note I had left to mark my place, were the words, O.L.'s favorite. My hands began to shake again, but this time not from fear. How did Dominic Montgomery get this book? Suddenly, the door clicked open behind me. Dominic stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, watching me hold the book. The fierce, intimidating alpha aura was gone, replaced by an intense, burning vulnerability that made his sense spike with a protective warmth. You left it behind at the shop, Dominic said quietly, his voice laced with an emotion I couldn't comprehend. 7 years ago. Who are you? I breathed, clutching the book to my chest. Dominic stepped into the room, his eyes never leaving mine. Someone who made a promise a long time ago, Oliver. It took me years to build enough wealth and power to corner your father. It took me years to finally buy your freedom. He wasn't my captor. He had been hunting my family to set me free. I stood frozen in the center of the sprawling, sunlit suite, my fingers gripping the fragile, worn spine of the leather-bound book. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, the frantic rhythm echoing loudly in the quiet space. Dominic Montgomery, the city's most feared alpha, stood in my doorway, looking entirely unlike the ruthless corporate predator the media painted him to be. The aggressive, suffocating aura he had weaponized against my father earlier was completely gone, replaced by a devastating vulnerability that flooded the room with the warm, comforting scent of cedarwood and deep espresso. You, I choked out, the syllable barely audible over the roaring in my ears. I took a shake step backward, my mind racing to connect the terrifying titan of Montgomery Holdings with the faded memory of my teenage years. How could you possibly know about this book? I kept it hidden. I never told anyone about the antique shop. Dominic stepped further into the room, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he were approaching a startled deer. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, casting it over a nearby armchair, attempting to make himself look less intimidating. You never told anyone in your family, Oliver, he corrected gently, his baritone voice washing over me like a heavy velvet blanket. But you used to tell the grease-stained mechanic at O'Reilly's garage on Fifth Avenue, the one who used to let you hide in the back office when your father's security details were sweeping the streets looking for you. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. 7 years ago, I was 16, constantly running away from the suffocating, abusive confines of the Whitmore estate. I used to duck into a grimy, oil-smelling auto repair shop to evade the private security my father hired. There was a young alpha who worked there, a tall, bruised, exhausted mechanic with dirt under his fingernails and kind, tired blue eyes. He never asked why I was running. He just quietly locked the office door, handed me a bottle of water, and let me read my poetry in peace until the black SUVs drove past. Nate, I whispered, the name falling from my lips like a forgotten prayer. I stared at his chiseled jaw, looking past the expensive haircut and the bespoke tailored clothing. It was him. The jawline was the same. The intense pea-piercing blue eyes were the same. You told me your name was Nate. My middle name is Nathaniel, Dominic explained softly, closing the distance between us just a fraction. Dominic Nathaniel Montgomery. Back then, I was a 21-year-old kid drowning in my mother's medical debt, working 3 manual labor jobs just to keep the lights on. I didn't have power. I didn't have money. And then one rainy afternoon, a 16-year-old Omega stumbled into my garage, clutching a library card and shaking like a leaf. Tears blurred my vision as the fragments of the past aligned perfectly. I remembered the last time I saw him. My brother Preston and 3 massive security guards had finally tracked me down to the garage. They had kicked the door in. When they grabbed me by my hair to drag me to the car, Nate had intervened. He had fought them with bare fists and a heavy steel wrench. But he was just one exhausted mechanic against 3 trained enforcers. They beat him mercilessly. They broke his ribs, fractured his jaw, and left him bleeding out on the concrete floor in a pool of motor oil. I had screamed, begging my brother to stop, promising I would never run away again, promising I would be the perfect obedient Omega if they just let him live. They nearly killed you, I sobbed, the trauma of that day rising like bile in my throat. I thought you died. My father told me the mechanic succumbed to his injuries in the county hospital. He used it to torment me for years, telling me my disobedience cost an innocent man his life. Dominic's jaw clenched, a dangerous spark of pure protective alpha fury flashing in his eyes. His pheromones spiked, but they weren't directed at me. They were directed at the ghost of my father. Harrison Whitmore is a pathological liar, Dominic growled, taking another step until he was close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his chest. I spent 2 weeks in the intensive care unit at St. Jude's Medical Center. When I woke up, I found out your father had bought the garage and fired me. He blacklisted me from every honest auto repair shop in the tri-state area. I was left with broken bones and nothing to my name. I looked down at the floor, shame washing over me. I'm so sorry. I ruined your life. No, Oliver. You gave me a purpose, Dominic said. Gently, so gently it made my breath hitch. He reached out and placed a large calloused hand under my chin, lifting my gaze to meet his. His thumb brushed away a tear, rolling down my cheek. Lying in that hospital bed, I realized that the world only respects monsters. So, I became one. I spent the next 7 years clawing my way to the top of the financial sector. I built Montgomery Holdings from the ground up, dealing in high-risk offshore acquisitions, leveraging corporate debt, and crushing anyone in my path. Every dollar I made, every competitor I destroyed, it was all for one single goal: to get enough leverage to buy your freedom from the man who owned you. My heart swelled with an emotion so overwhelming I could barely stand. He didn't buy me to use me. He bought me to save me. He had bought my favorite poetry book all those years ago, holding on to it as a promise. Over the next 3 weeks, my life transformed entirely. I was not a prisoner. I was treated like royalty. Dominic never pushed my boundaries. We ate breakfast together in the sunroom. He asked me about my day, and he listened to me, truly listened. When I spoke slowly, the deeply ingrained trauma of the Whitmore household began to peel away. I stopped flinching when doors opened too fast. I stopped apologizing for simply existing. My Omega instincts, which had been suppressed by years of fear, began to bloom under the steady protective presence of an alpha who actually cherished me. My scent, once muted and sour with anxiety, turned into a sweet, intoxicating blend of vanilla and white jasmine. But true monsters never surrender quietly. It started on a Thursday afternoon. Dominic had left the estate for a critical board meeting at the Montgomery Holdings Tower downtown. I was in the sprawling gardens, tending to the rose bushes with Mrs. Gable, feeling safer than I had in my entire life. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the front gate. The estate's blaring alarm system shattered the tranquil silence. Before I could process what was happening, 2 heavily armored black vans smashed through the decorative iron gates. Armed men flooded the driveway, overpowering Dominic's security team with sheer numbers. "OL, run!" Mrs. Gable screamed, shoving me toward the greenhouse. I bolted, terror seizing my chest, but I didn't make it far. A heavy hand grabbed the back of my sweater, throwing me violently into the manicured dirt. I gasped for air, looking up to see a face from my nightmares. Preston. My brother stood over me, looking manic, his tailored suit completely disheveled. Beside him stood a man I recognized from my father's private gallus. Grayson Consincade, a notorious underground broker and political fixer who specialized in illegal corporate espionage. "Hello, little brother." Preston sneered, his foul, sour alpha scent suffocating me. "Did you really think Dad would just let you go? Grab him. Get off me." I screamed, kicking wildly as 2 of Consincade's mercenaries hoisted me off the ground, zip-tying my wrists with brutal efficiency. "You're a very valuable commodity," Oliver. Grazing Kincaid chuckled, adjusting his designer glasses. Your grandfather, Elias Whitmore, wasn't a fool. Before he died, he locked the family's Cayman National Bank offshore accounts behind a biometric trust. It requires the blood and thumbprint of the last-born Whitmore. Your father realized too late that giving you away meant losing access to $300 million. Montgomery might have forgiven a $75 million debt. But we're here for the real prize. Dominic will kill you, I shouted, tears streaming down my face as they dragged me toward the van. He'll tear you apart. Let him try. Preston laughed, slamming the van door shut. We're taking you to a private airstrip. By the time the Iron Wolf realizes you're gone, we'll be in international waters, and we will bleed you dry. The back of the van was pitch black, smelling of rust, cheap gasoline, and Preston's overwhelming arrogance. I lay bound on the metal floor, every bump in the road jolting pain up my spine. My Omega instincts were in full panic mode, crying out for the Alpha who had sworn to protect me. I focused on the memory of Dominic's cedarwood scent, praying he would find me. We drove for nearly an hour before the van screeched to a sudden, violent halt, throwing me against the steel partition. Outside, the sound of screeching tires and shattering glass echoed into the night. What the hell is going on? Preston yelled from the front seat. Gunfire erupted. It wasn't a prolonged shootout, but rather the terrifying, precise sounds of tactical sweep. I heard men screaming, the distinct thud of bodies hitting the pavement, and then a deafening roar that shook the very foundation of the vehicle. It was an Alpha command, so raw, so powerful, and so steeped in pure, unadulterated rage that it made my bones vibrate. Where is he, Dominic? The heavy rear doors of the van were suddenly ripped open, the metal groaning and bending off its hinges. The harsh glare of floodlights blinded me momentarily. When my vision cleared, I saw Dominic standing there. He looked like the god of war. His suit jacket was gone, his white button-down shirt rolled up to reveal forearms corded with tension. His knuckles were bruised, and his eyes were completely black. His Alpha fully pushed to the surface by the threat to his Omega. Behind him, I could see the blazing wreckage of Grayson Consincade's convoy at an abandoned shipping yard near the docks. Dominic hadn't just sent his security team. He had brought hell itself. Preston stumbled out of the driver's side door, holding a trembling handgun aimed at Dominic's chest. Stay back, Montgomery. I'll shoot. He's our property. You have no right. Dominic didn't even flinch. Moving with terrifying predatory speed, he closed the distance. Before Preston could pull the trigger, Dominic shattered my brother's wrist with a sickening crunch. Preston screamed, dropping the gun. But Dominic wasn't finished. He grabbed Preston by the throat, lifting him entirely off the ground, suffocating the life out of him. You touched what is mine, Dominic snarled, his voice a demonic resonance that echoed off the metal shipping containers. I told your father I would bury you, and I am a man of my word. Dominic, please, I cried out from the floor of the van, struggling against my zip ties. Don't kill him. He's not worth going to prison for. Please, Alpha, look at me. The word Alpha slipped out, not as a term of subservient fear, but as a genuine, desperate call from an Omega to his chosen mate. Dominic froze. The suffocating darkness in his eyes wavered. He threw Preston against the side of the van, letting him crumple to the ground in a pathetic, gasping heap. Consincade and the rest of the mercenaries were already being subdued by the police, led by Detective Holden, whom Dominic had evidently called the moment he tracked the GPS chip secretly embedded in my favorite leather-bound book, the one I had tucked in my sweater pocket that morning. Dominic climbed into the back of the van, dropping to his knees beside me. The raging, violent warlord vanished instantly. His hands, shaking with adrenaline, carefully cut the plastic ties binding my wrists. As soon as I was free, I threw my arms around his neck, burying my face into his shoulder, inhaling the deep, grounding scent of cedar and espresso. I've got you. You're safe. I'm so sorry, Oliver. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. Dominic murmured frantically, pressing fervent, desperate kisses into my hair, pulling me into his lap and wrapping his massive arms around me. You found me, I sobbed, clutching his shirt. You promised you would, and you did. The aftermath of that night sent shock waves through the city's elite. Detective Holden and the federal authorities unraveled the full extent of Harrison and Preston's crimes. The attempted kidnapping combined with the illegal corporate espionage orchestrated by Grayson Consincade was the final nail in the Whitmore family's coffin. Clear's throat. Harrison Whitmore was arrested in his study the very next morning, dragged out in handcuffs by federal agents. The entire Whitmore real estate empire was seized, dissolved, and liquidated. Preston faced 20 years in a federal penitentiary for armed kidnapping and extortion. The monsters who had haunted my entire life were finally locked in cages of their own making. As for me, I returned to the glass and steel fortress in the hills. But it was no longer just a sanctuary. It was home. 3 months later, the winter snow blanketed the estate in a serene, quiet white. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows in our master bedroom, watching the snowflakes fall. I wasn't wearing my old drab clothing anymore. I wore one of Dominic's oversized cashmere sweaters wrapped in the overwhelming, comforting scent of my mate. The door clicked open and Dominic, Clear's throat, stepped inside, loosening his tie after a long day at the office. When he saw me, the exhaustion on his face melted away into a look of absolute, unyielding devotion. He walked over, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind and resting his chin on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about, sweetheart?" he asked quietly. I leaned back against his solid chest, turning my head slightly to press a soft kiss to his jaw. My hand drifted up to touch the dark, permanent bite mark on my scent gland. The physical proof of our mating bond, a claim I had begged him for during my first heat in his protective arms. I was just thinking about how my father thought he was selling me to a cruel alpha to save his empire. I smiled softly, lacing my fingers through his. He didn't know he was giving me the key to destroy it. And he certainly didn't know he was giving me the love of my life. Dominic tightened his grip, pulling me flush against his heart. "They thought you were a pawn, Oliver. But to me, you were always the king. And the Iron Wolf will always protect his king." For the first time in my life, looking out at the snow, I wasn't afraid of the future. I was completely, beautifully free. Thank you so much for listening to this dramatic Omegaverse journey. If Oliver and Dominic's wild story of revenge, healing, and true love kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our thrilling romance stories. Leave a comment below telling us your absolute favorite twist.